I guess this evening that you're here, if you're that you're here because you, your experience of migraine is not what you would like it to be. So I also guess because you're here that you're the sort of person that wants to do something about it. And I'm sure that that many of you have got your moment already. That you sort of, that's very, very interesting. I really must try that. And if there's one thing that you can get from the evening, just one thing you can take home and do differently, isn't that a piece of magic? So I hope you all get your piece of magic tonight. So the first question that I'd like you just to have a little thought about is, do you think about how much you value your health? And when you do think about it, which I suggest you do for a minute, is how much do you really value your health? And if just for a minute, think about on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is that my health is actually completely unimportant to me. It never, ever crosses my threshold of consciousness. I just don't think about it. And 10 would be, it is the most important thing in my life right now. And it continues to be. It's something I think about a lot, and it is something that I really, really value. Then that would be a 10. So if you just think of a number and put yourself on that scale somewhere between those two extremes, you'll have an idea. So at Birmingham's Pharmacy, some of you we know very well, some of you we'd love to get to know better, that our pharmacy team is passionately dedicated to assisting you proactively manage your health and well-being. And the important two words that I see here are you and proactively. And the you bit is really the key, because with all the health in the whole world that you can have, you come to see your GP, you come to see Joe, you come to see Jess, you come to see David, you ring up the Migraine Association, you can get loads of knowledge, you can get loads of understanding, but ultimately it is generic advice. It's advice that applies, it may be this and it may be that and it may be the other. But the ultimate thing is that each one of us is unique. And we're not generic. We're not most people. You're me. You're you. And that makes it very, very... the most important person then in identifying what truly is your trigger is you. Because we can all give you assistance, but you're the person 24 hours a day, 7 days a week that knows you best. So that any assistance that we can be on that journey, then that's wonderful. But ultimately, you are the powerhouse of your own health. And proactively there is that you have the power to have that control, so long as you get the right information and you know how to process it. And then, very importantly, you take action on it. So, as I said, we are unique, aren't we? So, we come in all shapes and sizes. We have all sorts of different hopes and dreams and attitudes and beliefs, and they make us unique. So, it is a matter of making sure that there'll be one nugget of information that each one of you can take. And probably if we did a straw poll, you would all come up with different things that you thought, that makes sense to me. So I hope that between all of us you managed to get that moment this evening. The thing that you may be think, I've got 3 children, they're between the ages of 7 and 3, and one of the things that we do quite a lot of at home is join the dots. And while I was doing join the dots with my son Adam last night, I kind of thought, you know what, this is exactly what I see as helping or assisting somebody with their any healthcare complaint, in this particular case migraine. Because if you think of all these dots on a page and there's no numbers on them and they're just randomly scattered all over the page and those dots are little pieces of information, then wouldn't it be very useful if somebody put numbers on them? And when they all put numbers on them, you then know how to put them into a sequence. And if you put them into a sequence, suddenly when you join them up, you get the big picture. And it all starts to make sense. So this is what I see as a perfect analogy for helping to identify what are the contributors to a migraine. Because lots of little things can be at play, and it can be lots of little things that make the big picture. It may not be one thing. So it may be combinations stacking up, that the lack of sleep stacks up with being late for work or being stuck in the traffic or eating the wrong foods or whatever. All of these stresses on the system can then all stack up to cause a migraine attack. The wonderful thing about that is, and I use like, what in the name of God could be wonderful about that, but the wonderful thing about that is, if you can pull one of them out of the equation, then you may not get to the migraine. So to be able, you don't have to have the full picture necessarily to make a big, big difference in transforming your experience of migraine or your experience of life. If you can only pull out one or two that you know are identifying factors, you can pull them all. That may mean that you don't get the trigger. So that's where the wonderful bit comes in. Now, Dave mentioned already that if you always did what you always, whatever the quote was. What was the quote of the day, Dave? Anyway, you always get what you always got. I'd even go a little step further, and inspired, of course, by the best. Einstein apparently came up with it. His definition of insanity was doing the same thing over and over again and expecting to get a different result. So this is where I sort of thought, if you're going around and around and around and constantly getting the same result over and over again, then maybe it's time to step off the Ferris wheel, look at it and say, what could I do differently? And one little thing could make the big difference. So I'm sure you've got inspiration as to what those little things might be. This is one that comes up periodically, and a big question in our environment at the moment. What is the cost and what is the value of what? Of anything. And we've already asked the question, which you have a number, of what value do you put on your health? And what the next kind of angle I would go at is, what is it costing you if your health isn't exactly as you want it to be? What is the cost of treating symptoms without understanding the cause? What is the cost of the pain? What is the cost of the tiredness, the fatigue, the cost in terms of sick days, cost in terms of stress? What is the cost of not doing what it takes to get off that Ferris wheel and looking at things from a different perspective? How would it be if the very thing you were using to treat your migraine or to treat your headaches was actually the cause of the symptoms? So in some cases, that's exactly what it is. And painkillers can induce headache. They can cause the headache. And this is the case for over 200,000 people that are living in Ireland. The thing about migraine is maybe that you have a migraine, but it's complicated by a secondary type of headache, which may be the medication overuse headache, and that secondary headache is putting a sufficient stress in your system that's causing another migraine. So the only way that cycle can be broken is to extract the cause. No amount of different medication will actually change that experience. And the other thing there, that caffeine is kind of flashing. I didn't realise it was going to be that active. But anyway, hyperactive caffeine is there. But caffeine can trigger migraine, and it can trigger headache. It can also be used to treat it. And it is in a lot of the pain-killing medications, which you may not realise. So you may realise that the cup of coffee triggers the migraine, and then go and reach for Solpadeine. And Solpadeine has caffeine in it. So it's another complicating factor that is worth considering. And if you knew that the medication was actually the cause of the problem, and if you knew that it was going to cause you to feel worse, if you had a pet, like this poor misfortunate dog, and you knew that by feeding him certain things, he was going to feel worse, would you do it? But if this is the case in your case, and medication is actually causing the problem to get worse, what are you doing to yourself? And what would you do in order to change it? So again, I come back to the cause and effect scenario, and we like to get to the causes of things. And I suppose he kind of look at it, right? I drove up from Cork to Dublin there last week, and I was thinking about, you'd wonder what would go on in my head sometimes, but I'm telling you a little bit of it anyway. We have motorways, right? And the motorway gets us very quickly from A to B, all going well, right? And it's a very strong path. And sometimes when you're on the motorways, you can almost get into a trance, and you're sort of like, and you're going, and you just get there. And you don't tend to notice all the exits and all this kind of thing. But if there was roadworks on the motorway and the motorway is blocked, then you'd start to notice other ways of getting to Dublin, which you had never, ever noticed before. And the brain is a little bit like that. When we have habits, whatever habits that we have, they have pathways in the brain, and they're like motorways. But that doesn't mean that the more we use them, the more traffic is on them, the more we have that habit, we repeat that habit, the stronger that pathway is in the brain. So sometimes we do need to have a traffic jam in the brain for things to get so bad that in actual fact we want to look at other options and to find the routes. And sometimes you can then suddenly see, look, I'm going to notice these exits that I've never noticed before, and I can actually get to where I want to go, but in a different way. And we look at things from a different perspective. And sometimes that's what it takes.